I'm joined live from Santon by CCTV Sumitra Naidu. She's joined by a special guest, Professor Anthony van Nieuwkerk. He is the Academic Director of the Wits University School of Governance in Johannesburg. Welcome to the both of you. And Sumitra, let me begin with you. Can you talk us through some of the key elements that will be focused on in tomorrow's meetings?
Well, thank you very much, Panina. Yes, it's been a busy 2 days, and of course lots of discussions, lots of meetings, lots of bilaterals going on here under the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Tomorrow, one of the key events to be held is the African First Wives meeting on HIV and AIDS. Of course, we heard today again President Xi Jinping making renewed commitments to security on the continent, and healthcare was very big in terms of those discussions. But just to unpack some of that and in terms of all the deals that came through today, I'm now joined by Anthony van Nieuwkerk, and he's a professor at the Wits University School of Governance. Thank you very much for joining me. As I mentioned, lots of deals being announced here today, 25 deals across Africa. That's over and above the 26 deals that China signed with South Africa. $60 billion in funding coming to Africa. How, though, does that translate onto the ground? How do all of these projects actually work on the ground? How does it impact when we're talking about eradicating poverty, providing basic services to people on the ground?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking me to comment on this. It's a spectacular setting, in Santon, where the summit takes place, the richest part of Africa by far, and so that gives you sort of a symbolism of the largesse of the meeting, where the Chinese delegation is meeting all of Africa at the heads of state level and senior government officials level, where these deals are signed and sealed. And indeed, you make a very important point. This now needs to be translated into benefits for ordinary people across the continent. And I'm sure that in coming days and weeks, more details of all these different 25, 26, 50 agreements will be released as and when necessary. But it's quite clear to me, standing here in Santon with you, that there needs to be the symbolism of development and poverty eradication. That needs to move away from where we are now and into the rural areas of Africa. And may I add very quickly, Africa is not one country. So we're talking about different regions with different levels of development and different interests. So it's quite critical, I think, for analysts in days to come to work out exactly where it is, where the money and the assistance will be spent. Let me say one more thing very quickly. I think it's important that at this level we have broad agreement about Africa's basic development needs. You've mentioned earlier peace and security and healthcare. Spot on. HIV/AIDS tomorrow, spot on. Infrastructure development so that traders can move across borders. That's also critically important. Once all of these basics are in place, hospitals, clinics, infrastructure, the hard stuff, we have to move to the soft stuff, where a farmer in a drought-ridden area somewhere in Africa can knock on a door and get development assistance that flows from the summit.
Having said that, it's become clear at the summit that China is on board. China has renewed its commitment to Africa. It wants to take it to the next level. It's talking about moving from strategic to comprehensive. Yeah. What is the role of Africa in this? Does Africa knows it's asking for all of this, but do we have the capacity? Are we strong enough on the ground to actually put the terms and conditions down? Do we have a plan?
Yeah. Sumitra, this is a question that analysts grapple with and commentators. Who sets the agenda between China and Africa? Evidence points to the Chinese analyzing the condition of Africa and determining what should be on the agenda. And Africans are very quick to agree to this agenda. And this is not healthy for a partnership, not a donor relationship, but a true partnership, which must become comprehensive and strategic. Now, for that to take place, I would venture to say that we need to breathe new life into the African Union officialdom and say to them, can you develop draft strategies for us that understands Africa, the regions, the needs? Share that with ordinary people. Have your imbizos or your get-togethers where you consult and talk to stakeholders and move away from the level where you deal with officials all the time and help us to strategize and talk to civil society, talk to ordinary people, talk to business people and get that strategies in place. I must also add that if I sound pessimistic, that it is true that there are key countries in Africa that know how to play this game and has done that for many years. So we're standing in Sandton. South Africa has quite a sophisticated diplomatic infrastructure, and indeed we've had a series of bilateral agreements between these two countries. Zimbabwe is the other one where the Chinese president just arrived from, and they also made deals. But if you go to other smaller countries elsewhere in Africa, the ability and the capacity to formulate strategy to deal with China, which is one of the world's emerging superpowers, is clearly and evidently not in place. So I would venture to say networks of analysts, academics, business people and civil society need to work with governments across the regions in Africa to deal with the question of strategy. If we don't do that, then there will be benefits to the few and a whole lot of losers out of these deals that are being made in Sandton today.
Very worrying indeed if it doesn't actually work. But you know, just going back to the security issues, we heard a commitment again that from the president, Chinese president, saying that they will continue to assist with peacekeeping missions.
Yes.
It will continue to assist the African Union. This is a real concern for Africa, and it's becoming a growing concern for China too, the fact that we have growing terrorist activity on the continent.
Yes, I mean, there was the Radisson Hotel in Mali that was attacked and Chinese workers and died in the process. So indeed, China has an interest in a stable, prosperous, secure Africa. It benefits economically. So do we, as Africans, benefit from peace and security. So Africa is the continent where most of the conflict is concentrated, and the UN Security Council spends most of its time, 70 or 80% of its time, on the problems here. The other part would be the Middle East, of course, and ISIS. And we're not isolated from trends elsewhere. So the question of terrorism and counterterrorism, the question of states that fail or are fragile and need to be rebuilt capacity, it seems to me, reading between the lines, that the Chinese and our African leaders are finding a way to cooperate on peace and security, which is delicate and sensitive and has not happened before. I look forward to the day where we can now unlock the potential and learn from each other. You know, African peacekeepers know what they are doing. In fact, African mediators, conflict mediators, know what they are doing. They need a bit of more capacity, support, airlift, those strategic issues that allows the African standby force to deploy rapidly where it is needed most. And I think the Chinese would be a preferred partner in this exercise compared to others from Europe or from America, where you find conditions and preconditions. We will help you only if you follow a certain line. That's definitely not what the Chinese are doing, and I think this is the reason why we are beginning to call each other partners, friends, trusted allies. And so there's a blossoming of the relationship, which I think the Chinese are saying, we respect your sovereignty and your independence, you respect our political sovereignty and independence, we won't interfere in those matters, which some analysts find problematic. But I think if you talk about Africa's development and stability and peace and security, then I think the priorities are right.
Anthony, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your insights on FOCAC. Well, that's all we have for you from here, from Sandton. Of course, you'll get regular updates on the rest of the weekend's events. Tomorrow, of course, the key event is the African First Ladies meeting on HIV and AIDS. Very important discussions to come out there. And of course, we probably will hear of some more deals over the weekend.